Hi there, my name is Randy and welcome to Life by Randy and LBR's study. And we're going to start by studying this book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, How to Lose Your Mind and Create a New One. It's got some interesting principles, quantum physics, but quantum physics for those of us who aren't scientists and mathematicians. Dr. Joe breaks this down in very easy to understand revolutionary breakthrough concepts. So we're going to go through that, and it has 3 parts to this book. Part 1 is the science of you, understanding the subjective mind and how the subjective mind interacts with the objective world, and how mind and matter are actually very interrelated. We're going to be discussing principles in this book about your reality experience and how what you think and how you think actually impacts your objective world, and it impacts the experiences that we have here. And if we don't like what we're experiencing, we can actually change it. And beyond changing our reality experience, co-creating with the divine, as I call it, we can actually do some more profound things, as I just did recently, heal from a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Now again, I'm not promising that that will happen to you. We are all on our own individual journeys and everyone is different. But what I can guarantee is that this book, applying these principles, learning these principles, will enhance your life and give you the tools on how to do that. Not only so that we can heal from our traumas, we can heal from past pains, we can make ourselves more whole so that we could show up not only for ourselves, but we could show up for this life experience. And the bottom line is so that we could ultimately serve others and humanity from a place of wholeness and healing. So let's begin. Dr. Joe Dispenza has a science background. He's a neuroscientist and he is a chiropractor. And he has his own testimony, which is amazing, of having been paralyzed from a biking accident, a cycling accident, to thinking his way into a full recovery. And he was my impetus, not only his personal story, but his research, his books, and his meditations led me on my journey. Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself is a product of one of my passions, a sincere effort to demystify the mystical, so that every person understands that we have within our reach all we need to make significant changes in our lives. Your brain is involved in everything you do, including how you think, how you feel, how you act, and how well you get along with others. It's the organ of personality, character, intelligence, and every decision you make. It is very clear to me that when your brain works right, you work right. And when your brain is troubled, you are much more likely to have trouble in your life. It is easy to understand how trauma can hurt the brain, but researchers have also seen how negative thinking and bad programming from our past can also affect it. In Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, Dr. Joe Dispenza is your guide, our guide, to optimize both the hardware and the software of your brain to help you reach a new state of mind. His new book, this was published in 2012, is based on solid science, and he continues to speak with kindness and wisdom, as he did in the award-winning film, What the Bleep Do We Know? And in his first book, Evolve Your Brain. There are so many ways to heal and optimize the brain, he concludes. So let's move to the introduction. The greatest habit you can ever break is the habit of being yourself. This is a time when not only do we want to know, but we want to know how. How do we apply and personalize both emerging scientific concepts and age-old wisdom to succeed at living a more enriched life? When you and I can connect the dots of what science is discovering about the nature of reality, and when we give ourselves permission to apply those principles in our day-to-day experience, then each of us becomes both a mystic and a scientist in our own life. If you take intellectual information that you learn as a philosophy and then initiate that knowledge into your life by applying it enough times until you master it, you will ultimately move from being a philosopher to an initiate to a master. So stay tuned, there is sound scientific evidence that this is possible. Yet we should never wait for science to give us permission to do the uncommon. If we do, then we are turning science into another religion. We should be brave enough to contemplate our lives, do what we thought was outside the box, and do it repeatedly. When we do that, we are on our way to a greater level of personal power. Change as a choice. It seems that human nature is such that we balk at changing until things get really bad and we're so uncomfortable that we can no longer go on with business as usual. This is as true for an individual as it is for society. Wait for a crisis, trauma, loss, disease, and tragedy before we get down to looking at who we are, what we are doing, how we are living, what we are feeling, and what we believe or know in order to embrace true change. But Dr. Joe's message is, why wait? We can learn and change in a state of pain or suffering, or we can evolve in a state of joy and inspiration. Most embrace the former. To go with the latter, the joy and inspiration part, we just have to make up our minds that change will probably entail a bit of discomfort, some inconvenience, a break from a predictable routine, and a period of not knowing. We'll start chapter 1 in the next episode. Bye-bye for now. Jumping into part 1 and chapter 1. Let's dive in. The Quantum You, chapter 1. Early physicists divided the world into matter and thought, and later matter and energy. Each member of those pairs was considered to be entirely separate from the other, but they're not. Nevertheless, this mind-matter duality shaped our early worldview, that reality was essentially predetermined and that people could do little to change things through their own actions, let alone their own thoughts. Fast forward to our current understanding that we are part of a vast, invisible field of energy which contains all possible realities and actually responds to our thoughts and feelings. And so we ask ourselves, can I use my mind to create my reality? If so, is that a skill that we can learn and use to become who we want to be and create the life we want to experience? Let's face it, none of us is perfect. Whether we'd like to make some change to our physical self, emotional self, or spiritual self, we all have the same desire. We want to live as an idealized version of who we think and believe we can be. When we lie in bed at night, reviewing our day and our efforts to be a more tolerant, less reactive person, we don't just see the parent who lashed out at our child for failing to quietly and quickly submit to a simple request. We envision either an angelic self whose patience was stretched like an innocent victim on the rack, or a hideous ogre laying waste to a child's self-esteem. Which of those images is real? The answer is all of them are real. And not just those extremes, but an infinite spectrum of images ranging from positive to negative. How can that be? For you to better understand why none of those versions of self is more or less real than the others, I'm going to have to shatter the outmoded understanding about the fundamental nature of reality and replace it with a new one. Always, in order to change, we have to come to a new understanding of self and the world so that we can embrace new knowledge and have new experiences. Can we agree on that? I'm going to read that again. Always, in order to change, we have to come to a new understanding of self and the world so that we can embrace new knowledge and have new experiences. Your past shortfalls can be traced at their root to one major oversight. You haven't committed yourself to living by the truth that your thoughts have consequences so great that they create your reality. Let me say that again. Your past shortfalls can be traced at their root to one major oversight. You haven't committed yourself to living by the truth that your thoughts have consequences so great that they create your reality. The fact is that we are all blessed. We can all reap the benefits of our constructive efforts. We don't have to settle for our present reality. We don't have to settle for our present reality. We can create a new one whenever we choose to. We all have that ability because, for better or worse, our thoughts do influence our lives. I'm sure you've heard that before, but I wonder whether most people really believe this statement on a gut level. If we truly embrace the notion that our thoughts produce tangible effects in our lives, wouldn't we strive to never let one thought slip by us that we didn't want to experience? And wouldn't we focus our attention on what we want instead of continually obsessing about our problems? Think about it. If you really knew that this principle were true, would you ever miss a day in intentionally creating your destiny? Would you ever miss that opportunity? Would you ever waste a thought? Would you ever think a negative thought? Would you ever think a destructive thought again? To change your life, change your beliefs about the nature of reality. I hope this book will shift your view of how our world operates, convince you that you are more powerful than you knew, and inspire you to demonstrate the understanding that what you think and believe has a profound effect on your world. Until you break away from the way you see your present reality, any change in your life will always be haphazard and transitory. And haven't we all been down that road before? Starting with New Year's resolutions, and you want to change and you're going to do this better. And the older you get, you think, I'm looping and looping and looping and still producing the same results. And not only that, but I continue to draw people and circumstances to me that keep reinforcing that belief or those beliefs that aren't so very positive. And you think, how can you change? And I can't pray my way out of this. I can't purpose my way out of this. What am I doing wrong? In order to do that, though, you'll need to be open to a new interpretation of what is real and true. To help you shift this mode of thought and begin to create a life of your choosing, I have to begin with a bit of cosmology, the study of the structure and dynamics of the universe. This chapter just might test your willingness to abandon ideas that have, in a sense, been programmed into you for many years on a conscious and subconscious level. Once you gain a new conception of the fundamental forces and elements that constitute reality, I'm going to say that again. Once you gain a new conception of the fundamental forces and elements that constitute reality, It won't fit into that old perception in which the linear and the orderly rule the day. Be prepared to experience some fundamental shifts in understanding. In fact, as you begin to embrace this new outlook, your very makeup as a human being will change. It is my wish that you will no longer be the same person you were when you began. Obviously, I'm about to challenge you, but I want you to know that I'm entirely empathetic because I too have had to let go of what I thought was true and leap into the unknown. To ease into this new way of thinking about the nature of our world, let's see how our worldview was shaped by the early belief that mind and matter were separate things. Always matter, never mind. Always mind, never matter. Connecting the dots between the outer physical world of the observable and the inner mental world of thought has always presented quite a challenge to scientists and philosophers. To many of us, even today, the mind appears to have little or no measurable effect on the world of matter. Although we probably agree that the world of matter creates consequences affecting our minds, how can our minds possibly produce any physical changes affecting the solid things in our lives? Mind and matter appear to be separate. That is, unless there's a shift in our understanding about the way physical, solid things actually exist. Well, there has been such a shift, and to trace its beginnings, we have to consider the 17th century mathematician and philosopher René Descartes, who developed many concepts that still have great relevance to mathematics and to other fields. In retrospect, however, one of his theories ultimately did more harm than good. Descartes was a proponent of the mechanistic model of the universe, a view that the universe is controlled by predictive laws. When it came to human thought, Descartes faced a real challenge. The human mind possessed too many variables to neatly fit into any laws. Since he couldn't unify his understanding of the physical world with that of the mind, but he had to account for the presence of both, Descartes played a nifty mind game, pun intended. He said that the mind was not subject to laws of the objective physical world, so it was completely outside the bounds of scientific inquiry. Essentially, Descartes started a belief system that imposed a duality between the concepts of mind and matter. For centuries, that division stood as the accepted understanding of the nature of reality. And helping to perpetuate Descartes' beliefs were the experiments and theories of Sir Isaac Newton. The English mathematician and scientist not only solidified the concept of the universe as a machine, but he produced a set of laws stating that human beings could precisely determine, calculate, and predict the orderly ways in which the physical world would operate. According to the classical Newtonian physics model, all things were considered solid. For example, energy could be explained as a force to move objects or to change the physical nature of matter. But as you will see, energy is much more than an outside force exerted on material things. Energy is the very fabric of all things material, and it is responsive to the mind. And it is responsive to the mind. Considering that these cherished beliefs held sway for centuries, it took some revolutionary thought to counter Descartes and Newton. Einstein, not just rocking the boat, rocking the universe. About 200 years after Newton, Albert Einstein produced his famous equation E equals mc squared, demonstrating that energy and matter are so fundamentally related that they are one and the same. Essentially, his work showed that matter and energy are completely interchangeable. This directly contradicted Newton and Descartes and ushered in a new understanding of how the universe functions. Einstein didn't single-handedly crumble our previous view of the nature of reality, but he did undermine its foundation, and that eventually led to the collapse of some of our narrow, rigid ways of thinking. His theory set off an exploration of the puzzling behavior of light. Scientists then observed that light sometimes behaves like a wave when it bends around a corner, for example, and at other times it behaves like a particle. Stay with me here. This is important. How could light be both a wave and a particle? According to the outlook of Descartes and Newton, it couldn't. A phenomenon had to be either one or the other. Quickly, it became clear that the dualistic Cartesian Newtonian model was flawed at the most basic level of all, the subatomic. Subatomic refers to the parts, electrons, protons, neutrons, and so on. Remember from your high school science classes? That make up atoms, which are the building blocks of all things physical. The most fundamental components of our so-called physical world are both waves, energy, and particles, physical matter. Depending on the mind of the observer, we'll come back to that. Depending on the mind of the observer, to understand how the world works, we had to look to its tiniest components. Thus, out of these particle experiments, a new field of science was born called quantum physics. We will begin to explore quantum physics in the next episode. Bye for now. Episode, we studied the 17th century philosopher Descartes, whose theories suggested that mind and matter were two very separate and distinct entities, and the mind could not affect matter. Sir Isaac Newton perpetuated those theories, and it wasn't until somewhat recently Einstein started the crumbling of that foundation of mind and matter. And now we know, according to quantum physics, that mind and matter actually are interchangeable. They are interdependent, and the mind affects the matter. There's science behind that, so let's dig into the science. The quantum atom. In order to do that, we do have to look at the atom and the subatomic atom, what happens at that level. I promise you this will pay off to get at least a little bit of an understanding of this, because it's going to give you context for your mindfulness practice and clearing the toxic thoughts from your mind and not ever really wanting to think a negative or bad thought again. And I don't know about you, but I don't want any negative or bad energy around me or in me. Certainly we live in this 3D matrix, this particular dimension, where there's a lot of negativity and fear kind of rules the day. And there's an energy and frequency to fear, and it's very controlling, and its desire is to control, but we don't have to be controlled here. We don't have to respond in fear, and we don't have to be tossed around a victim of our circumstance. We really don't. So let's learn more on the science behind that and how we can change that if in fact you live by fear, or you just want to create a new and different reality for yourself in general, or if you're moving through an illness or a heartbreak, any other negative situation, we can turn that around. The old school classical Newtonian version of an atom was the nucleus, the protons, electrons, the neutrons that were relatively solid. That the atom was made up of a solid nucleus with smaller, less substantial objects either located in and around it. Atoms seem to be made of solid stuff. If you recall, if you're old enough to recall this, in science class you had the styrofoam ball and you had the toothpick sticking out of it. The styrofoam ball was the nucleus of the atom, and you had the electrons, the protons, and the neutrons. Do you remember that? That was seen as a solid piece of matter. Well, according to quantum physics, nothing could be further from the truth. Atoms are mostly empty space. Atoms are energy. That's crucial. Think about this. Everything in your life is not solid matter. Rather, it's all fields of energy or frequency patterns of information. And you think about that, even solid objects are energy. They're made up of atoms, and at the subatomic level, they're energy. The energy that's happening in and around that cell is always moving, whether it's a wave of energy or whether the waves are being collapsed into hard, solid objects. Think about the videos that you've seen or information that we know of that by mindful attention, someone can karate chop board, solid matter, seemingly solid matter, by the energy of their hand. They can do those remarkable things. How? By mindful attention to focusing on their energy and the energy in those hard, solid boards. It's done. It's done all the time. We accept that premise. So if we could take that premise and stretch that understanding out and that knowledge out, and what would we like to karate chop out of our lives? For me, it was a stage 4 disease diagnosis. I wanted to karate chop that through my focused intention, and within 5 months, as you know my story, I did that by deploying the principles in this book. Let's see how we can do it. There's a puzzle when they discovered that the atom was all energy. They discovered that the electrons of that atom would come and go. They would do a disappearing act. They would come in, they would go, they would change their physical structures, their physical presence within that atom. And so on they went to a study of what that was and why it was doing that. And they called it the collapsing wave function. And that's on page 13. It's also called the observer effect. Because what they learned is you, by being your own observer in your life, by where you put your focus, by what you choose to observe in the now moment, you can affect the electrons in your atoms, and therefore you affect what happens in your energetic field, and you affect what happens in the quantum field, or the field of possibility. On page 14, some key paragraphs here. What quantum physicists discovered was that the person observing the tiny particles that make up the atoms affects the behavior of energy and matter. Quantum experiments demonstrated that electrons exist simultaneously in an infinite array of possibilities or probabilities in an invisible field of energy. We now know that the moment the observer looks for an electron, there is a specific point in time and space when all probabilities of the electron collapse into a physical event. I'm going to say that again. We now know that the moment the observer looks for an electron, there is a specific point in time and space where all probabilities collapse into a physical event. In my case, the physical event was my PET scan that showed no evidence of disease, no cancer, breast tumor gone within 5 months. That was my physical event. With this discovery, mind and matter can no longer be considered separate. They are intrinsically related because subjective mind produces measurable changes on the objective physical world. Let me say that again. With this discovery, mind and matter can no longer be considered separate. They are intrinsically related because subjective mind produces measurable changes on the objective physical world. Say that 3 times. So how would your life change if you learned to direct the observer effect and to collapse infinite waves of probability into reality that you choose? So what are you choosing? What is your ideal version of yourself? And what is it that you would like to create for yourself? You can do that by observing. Some call it prayer. Right? Prayer is a focused intention on a desired outcome. Or meditation, becoming still and thinking of nothing. Or if your practice of meditation is directing yourselves into health and wholeness. There's all kinds of forms of meditation, and prayer is a form of meditation. So many of us that pray, this is really what we're doing in prayer. This is what we're doing in meditation, is seeing a desired result and moving towards that desired result. But there's more to it than just wishing it so. And we'll learn more about that in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Hi there. Thanks for coming back and rejoining our study of this important book and the significant principles of quantum physics and how we can create our own reality. Let's continue. We left off last time with beginning to talk about the observer effect, or the collapsing the wave function. Again, I like to talk about it in terms of the observer effect, because that puts me kind of in the driver's seat, puts you in the driver's seat. We are the conscious observers of our lives down to the subatomic level. That's how powerful we are, and that's how important our thoughts are. So the last time we learned about the importance of electrons and how they are fluid, and how the mind of the observer actually affects the participation of the electrons within our atoms. They come and go, right? They disappear, Where do they go when they disappear? Are they waves of energy? And how can we learn to collapse the waves of energy into a physical effect or a destination or an outcome of our choosing, using our powers of observation? Let's continue to learn. As we discussed, energy responds to mindful attention. That's on page 13. As you can see, pages 14 and 15 I found really quite significant with all my color coding. And so bear with me as we read some sentences, some key phrases and sentences from these significant paragraphs on pages 14 and 15. You see, an infinite number of possibilities await the observer. So ponder this. Everything in the physical universe is made up of subatomic particles such as electrons. By their very nature, these particles, when they exist as pure potential, are in their wave state while they are not being observed. Thus, everything in our physical reality exists as pure potential. If subatomic particles can exist in an infinite number of possible places simultaneously, we are potentially capable of collapsing into existence an infinite number of possible realities. In other words, if you can imagine a future event in your life based on one of your personal desires, that reality already exists as a possibility in the quantum field, waiting to be observed by you. If your mind can influence the appearance of an electron, then theoretically, it can influence the appearance of any possibility. Stay with me, and you will see that with willful attention, sincere application of new knowledge, and repeated daily efforts, you can use your mind as the observer to collapse quantum particles and organize a vast number of subatomic waves of probability into a desired physical event called an experience in your life. Like clay, the energy of infinite possibilities is shaped by your conscious mind. Mind and matter are completely entangled. They're not separate. They're completely entangled. Your consciousness, your mind, has effects on energy or matter because your consciousness is energy and energy has consciousness. Those are powerful concepts that we need to ruminate on, unpackage, and work to digest. Like everything in the universe, we are, in a sense, connected to a sea of information in a dimension beyond our space and time. And so this is crucial to understand how you can cause an effect or make a change in your life. Page 16 at the top, when you learn how to sharpen your skills of observation to intentionally affect your destiny, you are well on your way toward living the ideal version of your life by becoming the idealized version of yourself. When we are talking about the idealized version of ourselves, we must always be mindful that we are a consciousness using a body and a brain to express different levels of mind. Another way to look at how we humans in the quantum field are connected is through the concept of quantum entanglement or quantum non-local connection. Essentially, what we do unto others, we do unto ourselves, because of this quantum entanglement. Essentially, once two particles can be initially linked in some way, they will always be bonded together in space and time. As a result, anything that is done to one will be done to the other, even though they are spatially separated from one another. This means that since we too are made up of particles, we are all implicitly connected in space and time. Think about the implications of this. If you can wrap your mind around this concept, then you'd have to agree that the you that exists in a probable future is already connected to the you in the now, in a dimension beyond this time and space. If you can wrap your mind around this concept, then you'd have to agree that the you that exists in a probable future is already connected to the you in this now, in a dimension beyond this time and space. Stay tuned. By the end of this book, that idea just might seem normal to you. Thanks for joining. Until next time, bye-bye for now. Hi there, welcome back. Thanks for rejoining me, and welcome to February 2022. It's February 1st. It is the month of Valentine's Day. I am wearing red in honor of Valentine's Day with some roses keeping me company here as we discuss thoughts and feelings and heart resonance. That's the subject of today's episode, the heart and heart resonance. But before we get to heart resonance, let's do a little brief review of where we've been. We've discussed the duality of the theories of mind and matter and how we know that they are interconnected. We are now going to discuss thoughts and feelings and how they are interconnected. And not only they're interconnected, but they have an impact and influence on us at the subatomic level, on our disappearing and what I call magical electrons, as the electrons come and go with the mind of the observer. The observer is you and me in our own personal lives. And the goal is to become better and better at consciously observing our lives, our thoughts and feelings, because thoughts and feelings produce brain waves, energy waves that are actually measurable, and there are studies that actually prove that. So let's dig into today's study. We've talked about subatomic particles, right, the electrons, and how they exist in an infinite number of possibilities and probabilities simultaneously. Well, how can we then select the one that we want to experience? Last episode, we talked about, as a brief review, the 3 points: willful attention, sincere application of the new knowledge, and repeated daily efforts. We can use our mind as the observer to collapse subatomic particles and organize a vast number of subatomic waves of probability into a desired physical outcome called an experience in life. Very crucial to understand. And I'm going to read at the bottom of page 15 and the top of page 16. So if you don't have the book, I will be scrolling it on the screen, because it's very, very important, and it's kind of heady, but it's very, very important, in fact, crucial to understand where we go next on this. The quantum universe is just waiting for a conscious observer, you or me, to come along and influence energy in the form of potential matter by using the mind and consciousness, which we talked about last time, we know is energy themselves. The mind and consciousness is energy themselves, to make waves of energetic probabilities coalesce into physical matter or collapse into physical matter. Just as the wave of possibility of the electron manifests as a particle within a specific momentary event, we observers cause a particle or groups of particles to manifest physical experience in the form of events in our lives. Let's take a moment to think about that and to reread that and reconvene. Let's look at thoughts and feelings actually producing test tube results in a study by a cellular biologist, Dr. Glenn Ryan, R-E-I-N, PhD. This study took place at the HeartMath Research Center in California. The folks there have conducted extraordinary experiments on the physiology of emotions and the heart-brain interactions and much more. Essentially, they've documented a specific link, scientifically measurable, between our emotional states and our heart rhythms. When we have negative emotions like anger and fear, those low vibrational emotions on the Hertz scale, our heart rhythms become erratic and disorganized. And in contrast, positive emotions like love and joy produce highly ordered, coherent patterns that HeartMath researchers refer to as heart coherence. He first studied a group of 10 individuals who were very well practiced in techniques using heart-focused coherence. And they were asked to hold vials of deionized water with DNA strands in it. And when they were asked to hold the vials and produce within them a high vibrational feeling like love, but they were not asked to do anything else with any intention with the vials, that first group produced no results to the strands of the DNA. A second group of trained participants were asked to hold the same bottles of deionized water with suspended DNA samples in it, and not only just create positive feelings of love and joy, but simultaneously hold an intention or hold a thought with regard to those strands of DNA to either unwind or wind them up. And what this group produced was significantly statistical results, that there were changes in the shape of the DNA. And in some cases, the DNA was wound or unwound as much as 25% because they held with their elevated emotion of love or joy a specific intention to change the shape of the DNA. A third group of trained subjects also held a clear intent to change the DNA, but they were instructed not to enter into a positive state. So they just had the intention of changing their DNA and staying neutral with regard to infusing it with any kind of intention, high vibration attentional focus like love or joy. And that resulted in no DNA change. So the bottom line here is what was learned from that study is holding a high vibrational state of being or emotion like love or joy combined with the intention for your desired result, actually produces the physical change. And that was revolutionary. That is revolutionary. And that's the secret of how you do this kind of work. You may be familiar with Dr. Emoto's experiments out of Japan, and if not, Google him and them. Dr. Emoto, E-M-O-T-O. He does experiments with water that they play different tones and music, and you can see the behavior of the water. You can also look for experiments, and I'll put the links below, where they have sand on top of speakers, and when beautiful classical music is played, the sand organizes into wonderfully coherent patterns, almost like snowflakes. But when other music, say like heavy metal music, is played, it doesn't have those beautiful patterns of coherence and symmetry. Very, very interesting, and I highly commend those studies to you to enhance your studies here. You find that frequency, the elevated emotion of love and joy, and you combine that with your intention of what your desired result is, and therein is how you collapse the waves of probability into the physical event or the physical matter with which you seek. The bottom line here is that an intentional thought needs an energizer or a catalyst, and that energy or that catalyst is the elevated emotion. Heart and mind working together, feelings and thoughts unified into a state of being. If a state of being can wind and unwind strands of DNA in a test tube within 2 minutes, what does this say about our ability to create reality? Stay tuned for the next episode. And with such gratitude and joy, thanks for tuning in.